What are some evolutionary, possible evolutionary explanations for people getting into paid sex work and pornography, becoming porn stars?
I guess there's two questions. There's one aspect is why work in the sex industry, and then why are people customers of
Mhm.
the industry? So you can't really have one without the other. I think it's in some ways. I think actually both have relatively simple answers in some sense, in a broad sense, anyway. If you think about what leads to reproductive success in males, obviously the more partners, the more offspring you could possibly have, right? And if you think about polygynous societies, males who have more than one wife or one partner tend to be more offspring. And so there's been lots of research for a long time, since the 70s in particular, talking about how male sexual psychology is in many ways, I wouldn't say it. Sometimes we talk about it like things like dual mating strategy is a term you see used, but it's if you have long term mating strategy, you can still entertain short term mating strategies on the side. And it also may be the case that male sexual psychology might also lend itself to multiple long term partners, like we see in polygynous societies. But in general, the idea that men should find low cost sex with new women appealing is part of a short term mating strategy, right?
Yeah.
If you're going to engage in short term mating, there are things that have to be present in your psychology for that to be a successful strategy. And one is enjoying lots of sex, with different people, and that doesn't cost you a lot because long term relationships cost you a lot. You have to invest in your partners, right? And that's true even for polygynous long-term mating partners. Maintain that, and that costs something. So if those opportunities, the idea is that if those opportunities arose historically, men should have been involved, take advantage of them when they. That's going to mean that in general, sex with novel women should be exciting to men, right? This is the Coolidge effect that they talk about in biology, that if you're mating animals, as soon as you introduce a new female to the male, he gets easily aroused again, even if he's already habituated to the other people previously. And maybe human males are not entirely different in some ways, right? Or at least physiologically, they may have these reactions. And so when you think about pornography, right, working in the pornography industry, if you think about it from the consumer standpoint, this is a smorgasbord. It's low cost. You're just watching an image. You're getting all of the visual stimulation that is part of male sexual psychology, that novel, sexually attractive, young, fertile looking women, right? This is like a fantasy realm. It doesn't ever happen in the real world, right? You don't walk into an elevator and there's six girls who drop to their knees to give you a blowjob. That doesn't happen
Yeah.
typically in an office building, but it happens in porn all the time, right? So it's a fantasy in that sense, but it's a fantasy that's tapping into. And so from the consumer standpoint, it's not surprising that there's lots of male consumers that are creating sort of a market for this. And when we think about why women or men might go into the industry, I think there's somewhat different reasons sometimes for men and women, but sometimes they may be similar. One of them is that you might like the opportunity to have sex with lots of people that you might not have the opportunity to have sex with otherwise. And from the standpoint of women historically in the industry, they tended to get paid relatively well, right? In general, female porn actresses get paid more than male porn actors, other than perhaps in the gay porn industry where really attractive men can make a lot of money. But in general, there's been a lot more money paid to women working in the industry. They have a short window of when they can work in the industry. Generally speaking, the mainstream industry is focused on women who are young, so like 20s, early 20s, early 30s, maybe. By the time she's 50, she's not making porn, except for a specialty market that is interested in older women. And there's a lot more of that now that there's a lot more of this online because you could appeal to everything online. When it was just mainstream market, commercial market, it was much more constrained range. But it's financial, right? Women are not mostly doing it because I want to have sex with that hot guy. They're doing it because somebody could pay me a lot of money to work for a few hours. And if you look at some of the interviews or some of the data on women working in the industry, women, at least when the main industry was the commercial industry, they might have been making 60 or $70,000 a year, but they might have been making one or two films a month. So
Yeah.
it's not a lot of work for the
High
owner.
leverage.
Yeah. And so I think that certainly, I mean, I think finances are why women go into the industry. I think that, but that doesn't mean that there aren't some women who might do it because they actually do enjoy having sex with lots of different guys, right? There's variation in sexual strategies and sexual interests in women. There's maybe a bit less in men, but there certainly is some in women. And so I think that the women probably who stay in the industry a long time, or at least a few years, are probably women who also enjoy that aspect of it as well. For prostitution, I think in some ways it's very similar. This is a male market for the most part. It's men buying the services of women or men buying the services of men. I think that there are, in a sense, a couple different reasons that women go into it. Some women are doing it and it's really survival sex, right? They can't make money any other way. They're runaways, they have a drug problem, and they sell sex on the street, which has a lot of really negative consequences and costs for them. But there are certainly women who do that, and that they're doing it for financial reasons. There's no other reason particularly for it. But it's just, it's not, I'm making a lot of money doing it. It's that I can survive doing this or I can pay for my drug habit. There are also women who work in the escort industry who might have relatively few clients and they might be making a lot of money and they might have chosen to do it because they're paying off student loans or they're making a lot of money. There was actually a study done in the UK that was looking at college students. The university wasn't happy when it came out, but it was looking at college students and how many of them were actually working in some version of brothel, indoor prostitution work to pay for their college education. And you can imagine why the university didn't like that.
Yeah, yeah.
But they were choosing to do it not in a survival sense, but in this is going to make my life easier sense, right? I'm going to school, I'm doing this on the side, and I can make more money doing this on the side to make my life easier. The girls that do escort work, some of them are going to be doing it because they can make a lot of money. And again, it's like some of the women working in the porn industry, I can get a lot of money and I can then do something else too, maybe, or build a different career if I want to, or make enough money that I can own property or have some other kind of job. I was at a sex researchers conference one time, and one of the speakers was a former exotic dancer who had gone and got a master's degree in economics. Like that was an interesting combination. But she owned several homes and stuff by the time she had finished her exotic dancing career. So she had done something very smart with her money and then paid for a good degree as well. In terms of why people do it, I think sexual psychology is a driver for men and just the desire for cheap sexual opportunities. Although it's also worth pointing out for some men, it might be that they have unusual sexual tastes. And so they're going to go for, maybe you have a partner who doesn't like it and you're paying somebody for it. It might be that you're having difficulty getting a partner. And so you pay for sex to get a partner. Or it may be that you only want sex and don't want a relationship. That might be the celebrity version of prostitution. So you're just paying for sex and you don't want any of the trapping. So I think, again, that's all coming out of a short-term mating strategy on the part of men. And I think for women, it's, I need resources, whether they're survival resources or other kinds of resources. And this is a market that I can exploit.
Yeah. It's really interesting. And I never thought of the business savvy side of things, especially for the student escorts.
I actually think in some ways it's interesting to think about that for women who do that, even because of the OnlyFans stuff now, right? There's been this mainstreaming of some of this adult content, but that people who go into it do need to be really financially savvy because you can make a lot of money, but you can't do that there's overexposure. You can only do it for so long. But I also think I've also thought about this a lot when I think about sports athletes that become very famous and make a lot of money, that they also need the same financial training because they often waste their money and then find out when they're older that they have like very little money because we don't do enough for young people to teach them to be more financially and economically savvy. I feel like that's something our education system needs to do more of with people, not
Yeah.
just for people in those areas, but in those areas, it may be, I think you can really see the difference between people who've been successful doing it and those who are not successful doing it.